A major revolt by teaching unions over government plans to reopen primary schools in England on Monday. They say fears over the spread of the new variant of coronavirus means online learning is the only sensible and credible option.
We don't think it's safe. We think there should be a period of closure to get those cases down, to make sure they've fallen well below where they were before Christmas.
Hospitals receive stocks of the second coronavirus vaccine approved for use in the UK. French police finally shut down an illegal New Year's Eve rave as 2,500 people gather, breaking coronavirus rules. And at the Old Firm derby, remembering the 66 fans who died at Ibrox 50 years ago. Good evening. The government is coming under intense pressure to scrap plans to reopen primary schools in England on Monday due to fears over the spread of the new variant of the coronavirus. The UK's largest teaching union says its members shouldn't go back to work, and head teachers are taking legal action to force the government to explain why it thinks it's safe to reopen primaries outside London and parts of the South East. The Department for Education says schools will implement appropriate safety measures to help mitigate the risk of transmission. Here's our education correspondent, Dan Johnson.
Children and teachers were amongst those invited for tests at Charlton's football ground today. One way to help keep the virus out of schools. But will it be enough? Some think things are out of control and they want schools to stay closed. Teaching unions say staff are at risk.
We know that members of our union got sick. Some of them died over the Christmas period. So there is the concern for our members. There's also the concern for parents and grandparents. And we don't think it's safe. We think there should be a period of closure to get those cases down.
London's primary school children will all stay off after a U-turn ended the patchwork of partial closures. So Harrison's got a fortnight at home.
We're not going back to school and we're going to have to do home learning.
What do you think about that?
Not very good because I want to see my friends.
And Mum and Dad have the challenge of finding childcare.
It all seems very last minute really, and it's all very confusing and they keep chopping and changing, which makes it very hard to plan.
Teachers are also being tested in Liverpool, Tier 3, where schools are due to open. Although scientists advised closures could help reduce the spread of the virus, officials say there's no evidence schools themselves aren't safe.
I don't feel they should close because I feel just as safe in school as I would do anywhere. I feel the children have missed a lot of education as it is.
The new strain has come out and what we're seeing happening in London was happening with us. We all, we had the extra testing brought in earlier on. London didn't, now they're closing. I think we should all be just doing the same.
I don't feel like they should stay closed. Our rate's a lot lower, isn't it? And the school that I work at, the head teacher there, she's amazing. She's put everything in place to protect staff, parents and children.
But in some parts of the country, council leaders are now calling for their schools to stay shut.
We've had a sharp increase in the cases. We'll be approaching 500 per 100,000 people in the next few days. And that's following the pattern of the places that have already been told that the primary schools should remain closed.
There's now a legal challenge to see the government's basis for reopening primary schools on Monday. In Wales and Northern Ireland, the return was already delayed a week. In Scotland, it's 2 weeks.
There is a lot for the government to consider here. The rising transmission rates, the pressure on the NHS and the demographics in different communities. It's always said keeping children off school would be a last resort, but there is growing pressure to extend these closures beyond London and parts of the South East. And teachers are calling for decisions to be made quickly but clearly.
A phased return is planned for England's secondary schools, starting a week on Monday, with the hope that mass testing will limit disruption and minimise online learning. Despite the downsides of that, it's already a reality for many children and possibly beyond the next 2 weeks. Dan Johnson, BBC News in South East London.
Our political correspondent Chris Mason is here with me. Chris, we've had reversals of policy in the pandemic on education before. Are we likely to see another U-turn in this regard?
As you say, Clive, precedent suggests that that is entirely possible. And there are two factors tonight which point to the fact that the government isn't entirely in control of what happens next. Firstly, local authorities, as we heard there, making their own minds up. So we saw the decision taken in Brighton. Birmingham City Council are saying they will support head teachers who decide to move learning to remote, to being done remotely for the next couple of weeks. So firstly, local authorities. Secondly, teaching unions. They are meeting this weekend. They are coordinating their actions. The National Education Union, the biggest of them all, saying, well, you know, maybe the solution here is what has to happen is teachers simply have to say we shouldn't go in. It's not safe to be working in a conventional classroom setting. So put those two things together, and even if the government is saying as it is, look, our default position is schools should open, will that actually happen? Will their hand eventually be forced? The reality is there are no easy decisions here, and I think we're in for a bumpy few weeks as far as schools opening and then closing and then potentially reopening is concerned.
Sure. OK, Chris, thank you. Chris Mason there. Well, the latest official figures show there were 57,725 new coronavirus infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. The average number of new cases reported per day in the last week is now 48,849. There were 445 deaths reported. That's of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID-19 test. But today's figures don't include Scotland. It means that, on average, in the past week, 584 deaths were announced every day, taking the total across the UK to 74,570. Hospitals have begun receiving stocks of the second coronavirus vaccine to be approved for use in the UK. The Oxford vaccine is being rolled out on Monday. The body which advises the government on immunisation has been defending the decision to delay giving people their second dose of the Pfizer vaccine so that many more people can receive an initial jab. Here's our health correspondent, Sophie Hutchinson.
Some of the first deliveries of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine arriving at the Princess Royal Hospital in Sussex. NHS staff are preparing to receive the new coronavirus vaccine, the second to be approved for use in the UK, ahead of a nationwide rollout on Monday when the first injections will be given.
What this does is it allows us to focus on the most vulnerable people and make sure they're protected from this disease. And ultimately that's going to keep people well, but it's going to reduce the pressure on the health service over the next few months.
The Oxford vaccine joins the Pfizer one, which was approved for use in early December. Almost 1 million people have received the first injection and expected a booster 3 weeks later. That's been extended to 12 weeks. The government's vaccination advisors say delaying the booster is the right approach.
We are in a dire situation in this country at the moment. The virus is rapidly spreading, and the more vaccine that we can get into these priority groups that we've identified, the more deaths and hospitalisations that we will prevent.
But some patients who've already had their first dose are concerned about the changes and that they could be more at risk from the disease than they'd expected.
I can manage that, but a lot of elderly people will not be in a position to manage it, and they'll worry a lot about it. And I don't think they've thought this through.
So how much protection does one shot of the vaccine give you? Well, government scientists say 2 to 3 weeks after getting the first Pfizer vaccine, around 90% of people were protected from falling ill from COVID-19. And as for the Oxford vaccine, that figure was around 73% after 3 weeks. So in the short term, protection seems to be high. Pfizer says, however, that its vaccine has not been tested for an extended second dose. And for GPs who've been rolling out the vaccine programme, the change in guidance has come at a challenging time.
Our most vulnerable patients who've had the vaccination often only have a landline and actually need to be phoned. So it is very time consuming to let people know. And also it takes time to explain to people. People are understandably disappointed.
But the government is determined the priority must be to get the first dose out to as many people as quickly as possible in order somehow to try to get a handle on the surging numbers of infections.
That is the priority, Sophie. Vaccinate as many people as quickly as possible. How well are we doing?
Well, in the past 4 weeks, we've managed to vaccinate around 1 million people. That may sound like a large number, but actually the government's scientific advisors estimate that we need to vaccinate around 30 million people, and those are the over 50s, people with compromised immune systems, NHS workers and care home staff. At the moment, the vast majority of those people who are meant to be being prioritised are still unprotected and at a time of surging infection rates. What's needed is a programme that can vaccinate millions of people every week. That would require unprecedented numbers of healthcare workers and a large supply of the vaccine. Now, the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, has promised that in the months ahead there will be a rapid escalation of the numbers of people being vaccinated. The great hope is that this Oxford vaccine will make a real difference. It doesn't need to be stored at those extremely cold temperatures that the Pfizer vaccine needs to be stored at. So it is easier to get it out to GPs and pharmacies. But it's understood that of the 5 million doses that we have in the UK, only 500,000 have been bottled up into vials and are ready to use. So you can see there are still some serious challenges ahead.
Indeed. OK, Sophie, thank you. Sophie Hutchinson there, our health correspondent. Well, French police have finally managed to shut down an illegal New Year's Eve rave that broke coronavirus regulations. The gathering of at least 2,500 people, some from the UK and Spain, took place at a disused warehouse in the village of Luron in Brittany. Our correspondent Hugh Schofield has more.
While the rest of France spent New Year's Eve under a nightly curfew, 2,500 people danced for 2 nights and a day in abandoned warehouses in a village south of Rennes. They'd come from places all over France and indeed abroad. The possibility that they might be putting themselves and others at risk from COVID, they said, was exaggerated.
Everything's reopened. The shops have reopened because they wanted to make money over Christmas. But that must have caused big gatherings of people everywhere. So is it any worse here than on the Paris metro? I don't think so.
Police decided not to intervene because they feared a riot. Instead, they surrounded the premises, and when, 36 hours after the party started, the revellers began to leave, they booked them for breaches of COVID rules.
The situation deteriorated very quickly. I had 3 officers injured, so I personally took the decision to disengage, at the risk of making the situation worse, to try and contain the area.
Elsewhere in France, the COVID news is not good. With daily cases now at around 20,000 and the vaccination programme barely underway, the nightly curfew has been brought forward from 8 to 6 o'clock in 15 departments of the east of the country. President Macron has warned that the coming months will remain difficult. With restaurants shut across the country, only a lucky few on the Riviera have been able to eat out in Monaco. But now even that pleasure has been taken away. From tonight, only residents of the Principality can book a table. Hugh Schofield, BBC News in central France.
Now, with all the day's sport, here's John Watson at the BBC Sports Centre. Hi, John.
Clive, many thanks indeed. Good evening. A busy day in the Premier League and Scottish Premiership. Match of the day and sports scene. Follow the news if you want to avoid the results. We start in Scotland, where Celtic and Rangers met in the Old Firm derby on what was the 50th anniversary of the Ibrox disaster. Both teams laid wreaths before kick-off in memory of the 66 supporters who lost their lives in a crush on a stairway inside the stadium at a match between the two clubs on this day back in 1971 in what was an emotional second Old Firm derby of the season. Rangers won the match 1-0 to extend their lead at the top to 19 points over the champions, whose hopes of securing that unprecedented 10th league title in a row are fading fast. Third-placed Aberdeen drew as Hibs, who are fourth, lost a third league game in a row. Tottenham are up to third in the Premier League. It comes as a third match in England's top flight this week was postponed due to coronavirus outbreaks. Harry Kane and Son Heung-min both on the score sheet in a 3-0 win over Leeds, the two linking up brilliantly once again, to leave them 4 points off league leaders Liverpool and Manchester United. Their North London rivals Arsenal won a third game in a row, beating West Brom 4-0. Crystal Palace also won as Brighton and Wolves played out a 3-3 draw. Fulham's match with Burnley tomorrow is off due to the ongoing outbreak in the squad. Champions Exeter slipped to their first league defeat of the season, losing 34 points to 5, while Gloucester are bottom of Rugby Union's Premiership, a match marred by a brawl in the final minute, as Ben Croucher reports.
With the dawn of 2021, a refreshing twist to a familiar tale. Where last year Exeter barged past all before them, including Wasps, you typically had to look really hard for weaknesses in their game. Keep looking, and Wasps found one. James Gaskell was hidden at the bottom of that bundle, but even in plain sight, the reigning champions still couldn't stop him. A job well done, with 3 more tries following to inflict Exeter's first defeat of the season on them, but not enough to knock them from top spot. At the other end, Gloucester's hopes of climbing off the bottom looked promising for 77 minutes. In the 78th, Sale's Josh Beaumont, back after 14 months out, put pay to that. From 10 points down, it was quite the comeback. And a frustrating finish for Gloucester. Billy Twelvetrees took it out on the water carrier, achieving very little bar a yellow card and some running repairs to the advertising hoardings, merely leaving Gloucester starting the new year rock bottom. Ben Croucher, BBC News.
And in the Pro 14 today, Ulster extended their unbeaten run with victory over provincial rivals Munster. Meanwhile, Edinburgh capitalised on some poor handling from Glasgow to secure their third league win this season. 10 points to 7, it finished at Murrayfields. And there's plenty more sport over on the BBC website this evening, including the latest from the World Darts Championship semi-finals. At Alexandra Palace in London, it will be Gerwyn Price against Gary Anderson in tomorrow's final. That, though, is all from the BBC Sports Centre for now. It's back to you, Clive.
John, thank you for that. John Watson there. And that's it. A quick reminder that the Prime Minister will be on the Andrew Marr Show tomorrow morning. That's at 9 o'clock. But from me and the rest of the team, have a very good night.